Our task may be unfinished, but we've made quite the dent, and that's something to celebrate. I can't count the number of times you pulled me out of the fire, or just listened patiently as I complained about one annoying thing or the other. So if I haven't properly said it before, I want to say it now. Thank you. Thank you for everything. The future is always a blank page, but I hope you'll stick around to help me write it. What do you say?
I guess in that case, the Merc Whistle is the one who... I guess the Merc Whistle then determines who gets the... Well, what letter you get then, huh? Okay. Fair enough. Huh. Be very... So, are there any paired endings or anything like that? I guess not. Alrighty then. I suppose it is technically over. Oh man. At least for this route. Although interesting that they don't really give much of a look at what what ends up... Although I'm very curious though as to how things are going to play out though, because there's a lot that isn't necessarily discussed in the different routes that... I don't know. How are things going to play out? Because the problem is that the route only really gives us insight into what's going on with a particular faction usually, and we only get little brief glimpses into the others, so I'm just trying to think of, at this point, what all more... I'm trying to think of how the story is going to play out in the other two routes, because there's got to be some difference in how things play out as a result of Shez being a part of the Kingdom or Imperial armies, but at the same time, what kind of influence will that have? And will it lead to significant deviations from what's already here? Because based on what I see in the support log, based on everything that can be found there, my suspicion is that a lot of what is going to be shown is just going to be a different perspective on the same events. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, but I'll be curious to see what is different, because I do know that there are... Well, I do know that you have to deal, fight / recruit or kill Geralt and Byleth at all three of the routes, and I know that it happens in a different chapter there, but I'm curious to see what kind of events play out. I mean, with Golden Wildfire, you get pulled in pretty much every direction, it feels like. You've got an attempt to go into... You have to defend against the Empire initially, then you get pulled into all sorts of nonsense with respect to... Well, you get pulled into... Oh, it's not Treehouse doing the localization this time. Interesting. So, anyway. Getting back on topic. Well, it's the same... Yeah, it's the same vocal direction, though, so that makes sense. Either way, getting back on topic. So, what was I talking about? So, you've got Golden Wildfire being... Well, the Alliance being pulled in literally every direction imaginable. Because first you have attempts at causing all kinds of havoc, well, just defending your home. Then you've got attempting to make havoc in the Empire before Elmira pulls you away. Then you have attempts to cause havoc in the Kingdom before those who slither in the dark pull you off the trail. And yet, there's still a lot, even after seeing to all this, that remains unresolved. Because how things turn out with the Empire and the Kingdom could have a significant sway over what ends up happening to the Alliance. So, it's really weird to me that they stopped at this point, instead of going into more detail as to how all three factions end up. Just, if only to say, okay, here is what happened with the Alliance specifically. The fact that there isn't a whole lot of detail spent on that is strange to me. So, because I had seen, I think, a thumbnail claiming that the game seemed pretty good by the standards of YouTube video. I only saw the thumbnail, so I don't know too much about what was said or who was saying it, but I think the thumbnail said that it's a game that felt incomplete. And since that it's someone who wouldn't be as slowed down, for lack of a better word, for lack of a better phrase, by the fact that you're streaming it, because I suspect that by now there are people who will have gone through this game in all 3 of the routes. So there's undoubtedly plenty of information out there as to how things play out and how everything is supposed to fit together. But I am still very surprised at the fact that there's very little talk about how Folan turns out as a result of the exact choices that are made here. Because does Claude stay on as the Kingdom of the Federation? Do the Kingdom and Empire still exist in some form? What's Almyra's status in all this? And yet now you're just going to put a finito on it and call it a day. So, I don't know how to make of this. It seems like there should be more going on with this. Renown exchange. Instantly capture a region. Huh. Unlocked maddening. Oh. There's a maddening mode. Okay. If you select the finish playthrough using the continue option, you'll start just before the final battle. Okay. In that case, I'll go ahead and... I guess I'll let this be the New Game Plus data. Okay. Huh. They added Fail Not to the screen. Because I know people were making a big deal about the fact that the 2 swords were crossed before you recruit Byleth, so... They added Fail Not to the screen now. So, mulling over all of that, I'm very curious to see how things will play out. So we've got clear data there that I can presumably use. I guess let's check real quick. Yeah, I think I will do a New Game Plus for the next round. So we'll see how that plays out. Let's see. Perhaps that was exactly the point. You have to play through the rest of the paths, and from those gain partial information, you get the full picture of what happened. Well, that's what's interesting, though, is that 3 Houses did a similar thing, where there was a lot that wasn't told in the moment, where, because I had started with the Blue Lions route within 3 Houses, and as a result, I got a very focused story on the problems that Dimitri specifically was facing, where you spent a lot of time over the course of literal years just understanding this character, understanding Vargas as a nation, and then over the course of that going on a really compelling character arc. Unfortunately, the linchpin's supporting structure isn't great, and that's something that I'll be using as an example in my review of this game, just to explain how I'm going to be critiquing it, but as a result of that, well, there was a lot that wasn't told. During that route, you learn nothing about the shadowy figures, those who slither in the dark. And during that route, you get very little insight into Claude or Edelgard's perspective. You're just, suddenly Edelgard is on the attack, and you just gotta deal with it. And there's also all of this other stuff that they very slowly drip feed about how Dimitri and Edelgard know each other, and what they think of each other. And because of that, it's definitely a matter of different routes, and that's partially why they feel like more complete stories in 3 Houses, but the thing is that the 3 Houses narrative is a complete narrative. And especially with some of the conversations that they added in the DLC, where they actually account for those who slither in the dark. With the introduction of the Ashen Wolves as DLC, they were able to say, hang on, Happy has this backstory, and as a result of knowing Dimitri's mother-in-law, which they can then introduce this aspect to ensure that, yes, those who slither in the dark are accounted for in the Blue Lions route as well, even if it's not the primary or main focus. So, the thing is, this time, though, it's not a complete tale. We don't know what the resolution, for the simple fact that we just don't know what the resolution is. And I think that's what's annoying about it, because, on one hand, technically, I have seen to a resolution of sorts by felling Rhea. But at the same time, there is still a lot of unknowns that did not exist at the end of 3 Houses, which is frustrating. So, I don't know about this. It's gonna take me a long time to process this, and I'm hoping that I'll get some solid resolutions as we go forward with New Game Plus, as we learn more about the circumstances, and as we press on ahead. That is my hope. Whether that'll end up happening or not, that remains to be seen, because what I would hope for is once that I've finished all 3 routes, that we do actually get to see in some form how everything plays out. Whether that ends up happening or not, I guess time will tell. Unfortunately, it's going to be literal months for me because I'll be avoiding spoilers, and at the rate that it took me to finish this one, I mean, the game came out, what? End of June, and it's already the end of July. And this was despite doing, and if I'm doing a chapter a week, and to be fair, I wasn't just doing a chapter a week last time, but even with a chapter a week, and if you don't treat the 2 extra chapters that you get when you recruit Byleth, so you get 11 chapters, it's going to be tough to fit that all in unless I straight up drop Xenoblade, which I'm not willing to do right now. Although maybe once I'm finished with Metroid Dread, maybe I can reclaim multiple spots or find spare time here and there. It's not as if I'm in a mad rush to finish my Torchlight 2 retrospective, since that I've finished most of the audio editing for that and can chip away at the video portion over the course of the next few weeks leading up to that game's 10-year anniversary, but I don't know. It's the same bittersweet feeling that I had at the end of the Blue Lions route, where there was a lot that, well, there was a lot of questions, especially given that after the time skip in the Blue Lions route, Rhea literally does not show up on screen again. So there was a lot of unanswered questions about Byleth's nature, a lot of unanswered questions about those who slither in the dark, all of that dynamic, but it was a complete narrative. There was an endpoint, there was a future that we could see. But that doesn't exist here. Why doesn't it exist here? I mean, theoretically, we don't necessarily need it, but at the same time, well, I guess what was the expectation for... I'm gonna kill the music real quick, just so I can keep focusing. So, I'm trying to think of what exactly the developers were aiming for, because the path that they have set up is not going to be the same path that led to the end of Three Houses. The way that Three Houses always ends up is that you are always consistently at a point where one of the 3 leaders is, well, in most of them, there is a major leader at the end of Fodlan who is effectively uniting Fodlan. That all of these disparate elements come together around something. Whether it be Edelgard's vision of the future, whether it be Dimitri regaining his footing, whether it be Claude's ideal, whether it be none of them. And yet, this time, I don't see that future happening in this iteration. Not without another game's worth of content. You would have to make a follow-up to this game to properly explain and to really flesh out all of this. Unless there is something tucked away within upcoming DLC, which, screw you if that's the case. Come on, make a complete game, then sell me DLC, you morons. Or, I don't know, this leaves a very bittersweet taste in my mouth. Because on one hand, from a gameplay standpoint, it's actually pretty decent. I did enjoy the gameplay aspect, and that might just be from finally getting a feel for how Warriors games work, after trying Fire Emblem Warriors while waiting for Three Houses, after spending a little bit of time with Hyrule Warriors just on a whim, after really enjoying Age of Calamity, to be fair. I ended up liking the gameplay of that more than the story aspect with how it ended up playing out, but this time, I don't know what to make of it. I don't know what to make of it. I'm hopeful that we will get further answers as we go further along. I'm hopeful that we'll actually get to explore this. But as it exists right now, it feels incomplete. And incomplete in a way that Three Houses didn't. Because with Three Houses, since that it was just its game, I could play it with confidence that it's self-contained. That I pick a route, there will be a complete story. That does not seem to be the case here, and that worries me. That did you actually complete the story? Did you think about where everybody is going to be after this? Is it going to there's a lot of unknowns. There are a lot of unknowns, and I'm really worried about how that's going to work out. All the same, I suppose time will tell. I suppose time will tell.